It's complicated. Or is it? Heard that line as an answer to a lot of questions in sitcoms and movies, but is it really complicated? Give unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and give to God what is God's. Is it complicated or not? Welcome to another of the Fool's Sermons. In today's gospel, the representatives of the Pharisees and Herodians try to trick Jesus by asking him a question that seems to have only a lose-lose outcome for Jesus. They start off trying to be slick and complimenting Jesus, saying that he is true and teaches the way of God, and that he does not care of others' opinions or appearances. Then they ask, is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? So if Jesus answers yes, he might be seen as on the side of Rome and its occupation, and therefore against the Jewish people. If he answers no, he could be viewed as an agent against Rome. And you know what the Romans did with those guys. Jesus has a more clever answer than the Pharisees must have imagined. First, he calls them out for who they really are by calling them hypocrites. Then he serves up a one-line answer that stymies them. Therefore, render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. By the first part, Jesus implies that, yes, the tax ought to be paid without directly saying so. The second part of his statement affirms that all, if not just the important things, belong to God. The joke about this scenario, probably being told by many pastors today, goes like this. The pastor says that we throw all the coins in the air, and what God wants he keeps, and what falls back to the ground is ours. I won't use that joke. So the big question raised, as I see it, is to whom do we owe what? Do we owe allegiance to the government or God? Is it complicated? I do not think it has to be only one or the other. After all, I assume most of, if not all of us here at St. Paul's pay our taxes. And yet here we are on Sunday morning worshiping God. I think the meaning behind Jesus' statement is about the larger picture and not just taxes. How do we navigate this world filled with the temptations of materialism and consumerism? The dichotomy seems to be earthly things versus godly things. If we forget about my mortgage for a moment, do I own my house or does my house own me? I've heard it both ways. It seems that in this world, the things we own sometimes take ownership of us. Our homes, cars, boats, cell phones, etc. And in their ownership of us, they seem to take time and effort away from our relationship with God. There were these three fellows at a post-funeral dinner talking about how much they gave to the deceased. First fellow says, I put a $100 bill in the funeral card. The second fellow says, I put $500 in the widow's hand this morning. The last fellow said, that's nothing. I put a check for $10,000 in the coffin just before they closed the lid. So to who do we give our money? Abraham Lincoln's on the penny, Thomas Jefferson on the nickel, FDR on the dime, George Washington on the quarter. Or do we go with the Kennedy half dollar, Sacagawea on the dollar, or Harriet Tubman on the 20? They're all dead, so why not put the check in the coffin and be done with it? Now I'm going to mention a word that stirs controversy today, in the past, and probably will for many years to come. Please stay with me through the end. Reparations. Do we modern people owe anything to the descendants of Afro-American slaves brought over against their will to help build this modern country? Recently, the Gladstone family, a wealthy British family that had their fortune made with the slave trade in the Caribbean, including Guyana, apologized for their ancestors having made that fortune with slavery. The current president of Guyana said that was a good step, but not enough. He called for reparations. Germany has given reparations to Holocaust victims and their heirs in the form of restitution and compensation. The NAACP states that reparations ought to involve a national apology, not a bad start, rights to the cannabis industry, financial payment, social services benefits, and land grants. This reminds me a bit of the 40 acres and a mule that you might have learned about in American history, and was the original reparations package known as Field Order 15, issued by General Sherman in 1865, but rescinded by President Andrew Johnson after President Lincoln was assassinated. The original order, I think, did not include the mules, but they had an abundance of mules in the Union Army, and after the war was over, what else were they going to do with all these mules? So they included them as a bonus. Former President Ronald Reagan signed the Civil Liberties Act into law in 1988, granting reparations and an apology to the Japanese Americans who were unjustly evacuated, relocated, and interned during World War II. The JUST Act, J-U-S-T, Justice for Uncompensated Survivors Today, was signed into law by President Donald Trump in 2018. It is aimed at fighting anti-Semitism. In 2019, Congressman Stephen Cohen of Memphis, Tennessee, had sponsored a federal bill that calls on the United States to apologize for slavery and the segregation that followed, and to look into reparations. Unfortunately, with the House the way it is now, nothing's moving anywhere except sideways. And since I have stepped into one taboo topic, why not take another step? A former U.S. president reasoned that giving everybody an equal chance at the line, and then giving those who haven't had their chance, who've had it denied for 100 years, that little extra start that they need so that it is in truth an equal chance, served as a long-standing rationale for affirmative action policies. That president was a Republican, Richard Nixon. When my children were small, one of them being here, we would walk and play, and occasionally one of them would fall and skin their knee or something like that. I would immediately try and comfort that child. Was I showing favoritism to the one child at the cost of the others in that moment? I guess I was. But at the time it seemed appropriate. It was what was needed, and I would do the same today. If we are to help those who have been disenfranchised or discriminated against today, we need to give them some extra care and opportunity. Why is all this important, and where am I going with this? Let's touch back on today's lessons for a moment. In today's reading from Isaiah, Cyrus was a great conqueror, but he respected the customs and religion of those he conquered. He is famous for not only allowing, but encouraging the Jews to return to Judah. He also helped them build the second temple in Jerusalem. He did not enslave the Jews. They had been captured 70 years before Cyrus came to power. Some things just do not have a statute of limitations. So what happened about 70 years ago today? Well, 63 years ago I was born, but thank you for the birthday wishes. We're not talking about that today. The 1930s and 1940s saw a rearrangement of the Middle East. Palestine was formed, consisting of Israel and the areas of the West Bank and Gaza Strip, with an internationalized Jerusalem. The West Bank and Gaza Strip were Arab properties occupied by Israel since the Six-Day War in 1967. This area of the world seems to have been home to the Philistines in biblical times and has been embroiled by war, occupation, resistance, seemingly forever. Hopefully we can stop that. And we are at it again today with the horrors we are seeing in Israel and Gaza again. Maybe we need another Cyrus today. Back to the recent readings. 2 weeks ago, we heard of the parable of the vineyard owner who sent messengers to the vineyard workers with a not-so-nice message. The messengers were killed. Last week, we heard the parable of the wedding, where the messengers with a nice message were also killed. Pastor pointed out that traditionally, we don't shoot the messenger. What did those two parables have in common? The people to whom the messages were sent did not want to, and here's the magic word, change what they were doing. So finally, where the heck are we with my somewhat scattered sermon? God gave us this beautiful, beautiful planet of water, land, and air, filled with all we need to get along. We just have a bit of trouble playing nicely on it. We can do better, and that means change. Not change for the sake of change, but change for the betterment of the planet and humankind's interactions with itself and the other creatures and plants on this magnificent earth. If you recall the last time I was up here, I pointed out that Solomon's ask of God was not wisdom, but actually understanding. It was through his understanding that King Solomon became known as the wisest king of all. Now, a wise man once said, never criticize a man until you've walked a mile in his shoes. Because at least then you'll be a mile away and you'll have his shoes. So let's give to Caesar what is Caesar's and to God what is God's, and do so wisely. We can change for the better, bit by bit. Sometimes those bits need to be larger, and sometimes not so large. Sometimes these changes need to be uncomfortable. Frequently, change is uncomfortable. But the end result can be so much better than we have today. So my takeaway from today's lessons are that I should give people and God their due, with wisdom and understanding, and to embrace the changes needed to make these things right. An eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. Thank you, Gandhi. Thank you all for listening. But wait, there's more. I originally ended my sermon there, but when I printed it out and left it on the printer, there was one blank page at the end, which I kind of took to mean that I'm not finished yet. And a lot of stuff has happened in the last week or two. So I wrote some more. I believe America is a great country. But great compared to what? Great for whom? Last week, a 6-year-old boy was stabbed to death here in America by an elderly white male simply for loving God in a different way. The boy was Muslim. I have spoken before of the two wolves inside us, the good wolf and the bad wolf, and how the wolf we become is the one we feed. It seems to me the murderer fed the evil, hateful wolf. Although not part of today's lessons, I recall Jesus saying that a kingdom divided cannot stand. Slogans and phrases can be funny and catchy, but sometimes they are nefarious and subversive. When I was an ER doc, oftentimes it became very hectic. Patients lying on stretchers in every nook of the hallways, ambulances lined up at the back door, with more on the way. Some patients were critically ill, while others were not. I had to figure out who was who and give everyone the appropriate and best care I could deliver. Many times I had to look at a patient and say to myself, okay, John, although this person has a lot going on, in 25 words or less, what do I need to focus on right here, right now? By reducing the needs of the patient based on the importance of their problems at that specific moment, I was able to see a clear path through the entire group in the ER that needed my limited time and attention. But reducing the situation too much would not be helpful. In a debate, that technique is termed reductio ad absurdum, reducing to the absurd degree. My country, love it or leave it, is an absurdity in my opinion. I love the United States of America, as did my parents, who were immigrants, sort of. It's complicated. I do not like to see it move towards becoming the divided states of America. He who must not be named wins when we are divided. I'm not talking about Voldemort. We can do better. We can make a great place better. We can spread love and caring, not hate and deceit. This last bit was added on at the end. And then I saw the story about Wadea Al-Fayoum, the 6-year-old Muslim boy that was stabbed to death. I had to put it in. I apologize if I erred in any way. Finally, we need to be like Cyrus and free our slaves and help them build better lives. Let me quote part of a song here. Land of the free. Let's make it free for all, not just more free for some than others. Home of the brave. I wonder what the Native Americans thought of that. Again, home for all. We need to listen to Jesus, and we must give to Caesar what is Caesar's. But more importantly, we must give to God that which is God's. I suggest we work on a world filled with faith, hope, and love, the greatest of which you decide. Thank you.